My husband, Jack, gave Andy Primark a job after he got a lot of money from his family. He said to me, "I don't need to stay with you anymore. I'm getting $5 million. I don't need you when I have all that money." His words were cold, and it felt like he was ending our marriage after being together for a long time. I felt like I was just in his way, but Jack doesn't know yet about the big secret connected to the $5 million he's inheriting. "Mom, is it true that Grandpa is really sick?" My daughter Sophie surprised me with her question. Jack's dad, Ethan, being very sick was supposed to be a secret between Jack and me. "Did you hear that from your dad?" The only one who could have told Sophie is Jack. "Yes, Dad called and said I should give up Grandpa's money." Sophie's words made me worried. Just because of that one phone call, my peaceful life was going to change. A few days after Sophie's call, Ethan passed away quietly. Since I got married, I've lived with Jack's parents and I've always been there to help them when they were sick. It's been 5 years since Jack's mom died, and now we got the news about Ethan. The funeral went smoothly, but just when I thought things would calm down, my husband's behavior changed a lot. "Why is this place so dirty? Have you not been cleaning properly?" Jack keeps pointing out tiny bits of dust and small stains. "I'm sorry, maybe I missed it. I'll clean it right now." "This place doesn't look clean either." "Are you sure you clean every day?" "Yes, I clean like I always do. Even though I clean like usual, I don't understand why Jack is so mad. But it seems like it's not just about cleaning." "Why did you make this? I wish you'd think more of how it tastes when you cook. It's tough when the meals I put effort into get criticized one by one. Even the dishes he used to love are now not good enough. Is something bothering you lately?" I finally ask, but it seems to make him even more upset. There's no point denying it. "Honestly, the food you make isn't good. I've been putting up with it because my parents never complained, but I've always thought it lacked flavor." Jack's words hurt me deeply. It's the first time he's criticized me so harshly. When Jack was this upset, I knew saying anything would just make it worse. My mom always cleaned and did laundry perfectly, and when she cooked, she put so much care into it. "You're nothing like her. I've been patient, but I can't take it anymore." It was the first time he compared me to his mother and criticized me. All I could do was think hard about myself. "I'm really sorry. I never thought he didn't like my cooking." Jack always used to smile and say it's delicious when he ate. When we first got married, his mom gave me cooking tips. It's hard to believe he always thought my cooking was bland. Tears started to flow. "Do you think crying will change anything? Your tears don't mean anything now. Don't cry in front of me. Everything lately just feels so hard." After he said that, Jack suddenly got up and left the house, slamming the door. "Jack, where are you going? Please come back." But he didn't seem to hear me. My head was spinning, trying to understand this sudden change, unable to grasp what had just happened. Until a few months ago, we were a close couple, sharing everything, holding hands, enjoying the little things in life together, and facing small problems as a team. I couldn't understand why we had grown apart. Then, I remembered what Sophie had said during our call. "It's about Grandpa's inheritance." Sophie's voice sounded unsure. That night, Jack came home much later than usual, and I didn't get the chance to ask him about it. Was something going on? Maybe Jack had learned something about the inheritance and didn't want to talk about it. I tried to talk to Sophie about it. Why are they talking about the inheritance while Grandpa is still healthy? She had her doubts about Jack and told me she had shared them with him. If things stay the same with the inheritance, I'll get everything. Considering Sophie, I think this is the best option. Remembering how Jack had been distant with Sophie lately, I started to have doubts. The thought of Jack taking all the inheritance and leaving me behind made my chest feel tight, and tears filled my eyes again. In my sadness, I noticed the sounds around me more vividly. Just as the room went quiet, the phone suddenly rang loudly. I didn't feel like answering it, but it could be important. Looking at the caller ID, I saw Jack's name, the same Jack who had left earlier. I felt drained, but I didn't want to face any consequences for ignoring the call, so I reluctantly picked up. "What are you doing? Don't make me wait." "I don't have much time," he said in a commanding tone that caught me off guard. He could be stubborn sometimes, but he wasn't the type to yell without a reason. Feeling surprised by his sudden change in behavior, I let out a small sigh, hoping he wouldn't notice. "What's wrong? Is something the matter? I wanted to talk to you about something." "I'll be home soon. Stay there and wait for me," Jack's voice sounded colder than usual lately. I just replied with a quick okay and hung up. When I looked at the clock, more than 3 hours had passed since Jack left. I had been crying so much, feeling confused and hurt, that I hadn't noticed the time passing. After a while, I heard the door open and Jack's footsteps. A sweet smell, a body wash we didn't have at home, drifted from him. That unfamiliar scent made the pain in my chest worse. I'm going straight to work. I want to end our relationship. As a thank you, I'll give you $220,000. His words confirmed my worst fears. Even though I had feared it, facing this reality was still shocking. I felt like I couldn't cry anymore. I'm tired of you not taking care of things at home. I want to live peacefully as I get older. Linda had also hoped for a peaceful old age, but it seemed like Jack was the one ruining that dream. Why? My words trailed off as I tried to find something to say. Jack looked at me with a smug smile. Then suddenly, Jack's phone rang with a loud ringtone. It was a tone I didn't recognize, different from his usual one. To me, it felt like the strange sound hinted at communication from someone specific. I'm sorry, but I haven't finished my errands yet. Linda sensed a hint of softness in Jack's voice, different from his usual tone towards her. It felt somewhat gentler and more personal. Plus, with the sweet scent of body wash lingering in the room, the unfamiliar ringtone from earlier, and the change in Jack's demeanor, it all hinted at something he might be hiding. I knew it, Linda whispered quietly so Jack wouldn't hear. His affair was becoming too obvious. Considering the inheritance he might get soon, the alimony might not matter to him, even if his cheating comes out. After finishing his call, Jack looked at Linda with cold, emotionless eyes. My plans haven't changed. I need you to sign this document. I'll be in touch later. Make sure it's signed by then. I won't be coming back to this house. Remember, this house is now yours. Without saying another word or even looking at her, Jack headed towards the door. What did our 40-year marriage mean? A few days later, Linda found herself at a lawyer's office, gathering information about Jack's actions and Effen's inheritance. She explained everything to their daughter, Sophie. Sophie's expression changed. It was painful for Linda to admit their mistakes to their daughter, but Sophie, out of love for her mother, cried and then resolved to confront Jack. She even introduced Linda to a lawyer to help them through it. Hello, I'm Robinson. I'll be handling your case. I'll do my best to support you, said the woman named Robinson, sitting across from me. She seemed to be in her late 40s, radiating a calm presence. Her tidy hair and professional attire gave off a sense of professionalism. Her clear way of speaking made me feel reassured. I'm Lily Johnson. I'm sorry for reaching out to you so suddenly. I'm a bit nervous since it's our first meeting in these circumstances, I said. That's okay. Sophie has already given me some information. She briefed me on the situation, so I can discuss it with you calmly, replied Mrs. Robinson. After researching and gathering information both by myself and with Mrs. Robinson's help, we confirmed some facts. My husband doesn't have any siblings, so if Sophie gives up the inheritance, the big fortune, around $5 million, will all go to him. Also, he started an affair with a woman named Jennifer at a bar they visited, and it seems the relationship lasted about 6 months. I was curious about what happened between her and my husband. I admitted to Mrs. Robinson during our joint investigation. Together, we uncovered an important fact that my husband might not know yet. Linda, how do you intend to proceed from here? Mrs. Robinson asked me gently, her eyes soft and understanding. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I deeply appreciate it, I replied, smiling gratefully at her. After paying the fee for the procedures and exchanging a few words, I quietly left her office. 5 days later, I got a call from Jack on my cell phone. He suggested meeting at a quiet cafe. I arrived a bit early, and the cafe was surprisingly empty. The owner welcomed me warmly and said I could sit anywhere. I chose a seat by the window to enjoy the peaceful view outside. After a while, the bell on the door rang, and I saw Jack and his new girlfriend, Jennifer, walking in. When Jack saw me, he smirked proudly. Are you ready for the divorce? He asked bluntly. I was taken aback by his first statement. It seemed like he was convinced he was in control of the situation. Is this your new partner? I hadn't expected him to bring her to such an important discussion, and I was surprised by his decision. I wondered if he was still the man I once loved deeply. Had he changed because of his cheating, or was he always like this? I couldn't tell. You're Jack's wife, right? I'm Jennifer. I've recently started seeing him, she said, suddenly smiling. I couldn't quite understand the meaning behind her sudden smile. I've heard a lot about you from Jack. Seeing you in person, you do look a bit older. I wonder how Jack put up with all these years. I feel a bit sorry for him. Jennifer seemed to take great care of her appearance. She looked much younger than her actual age, which was in her 60s. Compared to her, I might look my age, but I couldn't accept the way she said it. Jennifer, it's those kinds of comments I warned you about, Jack interjected. But yes, I did think that. But Jack, if it were me, I would cherish you more, I said softly. I understand, Linda. I don't want you to overthink it anymore. I just want you to file the divorce papers, Jack said, his attitude not surprising me. Hold on, there's something I need to discuss, I said, noticing a hint of confusion on Jack's face. What do you mean? Is this about your father's inheritance? Is that why, after all these years of marriage, you're making this decision? I wanted to know the truth behind everything. I fail to see how my father's inheritance and you are connected. That's solely my father's affair. I've heard detailed stories about your father's extensive inheritance from Sophie. I know its value. So what? That inheritance isn't for you to claim, Jack retorted. But I'll answer. Actually, more than the inheritance itself, the end of caring for my parents is one of the reasons I want to part ways with you. Just a caregiver role, I couldn't believe Jack saw me only as a caregiver and not the loving wife I used to be. I don't even have the energy to cry. Can we speed this up, Jack? I want to start our new life. Besides, have you still not let go of Jack? Anger and sadness hit me in waves. My hand trembled as I took a deep breath and pulled out the divorce papers. But my name isn't written yet. The situation isn't settled for me to hand them over. You remember promising me the house and money, right? I remembered our conversation clearly. Yeah, I did say that. I'm a man of my word, so I plan to give you the house and money. You say you're kind, but a truly kind person wouldn't just use their wife as a caregiver and then abandon her. So I'm demanding rightful compensation of $30,000 and the rights to the house, I said firmly. What compensation? When we talked about money, it was supposed to be $20,000. You always nitpick at the very end. Your attitude of trying to pay me the absolute minimum is so obvious. But the difference of $10,000 means a lot to me, Jack retorted. So I think $30,000 as compensation is fair. Your girlfriend is Jennifer, right? I thought of claiming from her too, but instead, I want to settle for $330,000. And I intend to sign the divorce papers right here in front of you. Jennifer unexpectedly commented, first suggesting that $30,000 would be okay. Jack, pay it if you're satisfied with it, she added. With Jennifer's statement, Jack finally agreed to the alimony of $30,000. Now we need Jack's signature on the land title change document Mrs. Robinson prepared and the notarized alimony agreement, I said calmly, surprising Jack with my preparedness. We lined up our seals at the designated spot, and Jack smiled as if he anticipated something. So Linda, will you sign the divorce papers right now? He asked. Understood. Here's the divorce paper, I replied, carefully writing my name and firmly stamping it. Jack couldn't hold back his laughter and laughed out loud again. With this, you and I no longer have any relationship. Also, I have something to tell you. Actually, I'm set to inherit $5 million, so I didn't need someone like you. Thanks for the divorce. What a foolish ex-wife you had, letting go so easily for just $30,000. Jack sneered as I left, followed by the loud laughter of Jack and Jennifer echoing. I hurriedly left and headed to City Hall. My only goal now was to complete this procedure as quickly as possible and sever ties with the two of them completely. They might be laughing happily now, but I wondered how long their happiness would last. A month later, I sold the house I received from Jack, prepared for a new life, and decided to live near my daughter Sophie, who planned to start her life near her husband's parents' home. Despite my concerns about Jack's mother living nearby, Sophie's husband warmly welcomed me and was always considerate, which reassured me greatly. My daughter Sophie initially seemed angry at Jack's actions, but when I shared a certain fact with her, her expression completely changed and she smiled brightly. I had a hunch that Jack would soon realize my plan. As evidence, I deliberately didn't change my mobile number. The day my intuition became reality came sooner than expected. From the afternoon, my phone rang repeatedly, and sure enough, it was Jack. He called many times, but at first, I purposely didn't answer. After receiving repeated calls, I finally picked up. Hello, why are you doing this? I couldn't hide my surprise. What's the matter? You called out of the blue. Jack raised his voice. What's the problem? Where are you right now? I thought you might have visited our old house. But in reality, that house had already been sold. Since we've decided to divorce, there's no me for you to be involved with anymore. Where did Sophie go? I can't find her. It seemed he went to Sophie's old house. Of course, she wasn't there, and I handled all the information and procedures related to Sophie's husband's family home. So Jack had no way of knowing. He seems to have hit a dead end and contacted me.
The reservation is set for 7 people. This individual will have a separate seat, please. That cheerful voice belonged to my mother-in-law, who always finds joy in teasing me. But today, everything changes. Armed with a secret, I've decided it's time to reveal all to our relatives. My name is Emily. I'm 28 and work as a chef. I met my husband, Chris, at a popular restaurant where I worked after culinary school. Chris manages his family's electronics store, a business passed down for 3 generations. After his father's passing last year, Chris became the 3rd-generation owner. I come from a simple family, but cooking runs in our blood. My parents and older brother are all chefs, and I've been cooking since childhood. With talent and hard work, I graduated top of my class. Cooking has always been my passion, but things changed after marrying Chris. Right after we tied the knot, I moved in with my mother-in-law. Chris had always lived at home, and with his father's recent passing, he felt it was necessary for me to be there to support his mother. I had imagined our married life eagerly, knowing that eventually, as the eldest son, we would reside with his mother. However, I hadn't anticipated it happening so soon. Maybe I should have expressed my concerns before marriage, but given the circumstances, I didn't want to seem difficult. Nonetheless, what's done is done. However, when we initially moved in together, my mother-in-law was incredibly kind. She would bring me cream puffs from my favorite bakery and insisted on taking care of most household chores. Reasoning that I was working, she handled all the cooking, but I struggled with the taste. It seemed her dishes were always too intense for my palate. I later learned she hailed from the southern part of the country, where people supposedly prefer salty foods. However, not everyone from the South shares this taste preference. Some of my southern co-workers actually preferred milder flavors. Regardless, my mother-in-law's cooking went beyond salty. Her stews were so dark, I couldn't discern the ingredients, and they tasted like concentrated barbecue sauce. She would insist I have more, claiming it complemented bread well. When I voiced my struggle with the saltiness, Chris would ask if she had toned it down, to which she would reply with uncertainty, adjusting the seasoning based on my feedback. It left me feeling uneasy. We carried on like this for a while, but my work started to suffer. Constantly eating my mother-in-law's meals seemed to numb my taste buds, making it hard for me to discern flavors. Thankfully, the head chef always checked my dishes before service, sparing me any reprimands. Realizing this couldn't continue, I began waking up earlier than my mother-in-law, especially for breakfast, which seemed to alleviate some of my struggles at work. Oddly, her demeanor toward me grew colder. She started ignoring my greetings and even criticized my cooking. "Emily, this lacks flavor. You need to season it properly. Just because you're busy, what's your excuse?" "But mother-in-law, I've seasoned it as per the recipe. Please taste it." She did, only to respond, "It's still bland. Can't you tell?" Adding more would be unhealthy. What's wrong with enjoying good food? Don't let your skills go to waste. With that, she poured an excessive amount of soy sauce over my dish. "I'm concerned about our health." I protested, but she brushed it off. I had a hunch about what triggered my mother-in-law's sudden change in behavior. It stemmed from an incident at my niece's birthday party hosted at our home. My husband has 2 sisters, both married and living separately. Despite our limited interactions, they've always been kind, even offering to intervene if I faced any issues with my mother-in-law. Their husbands are also pleasant individuals. During the party, which celebrated my older sister-in-law's daughter turning 5, I assisted my mother-in-law in the kitchen. The dining table boasted an array of dishes, each clearly labeled with its creator. As the festivities commenced, my sister-in-law remarked, "Our daughter adores the omelette rice from Emily's restaurant. Having it here today is a treat." "I actually make the omelettes at work," I responded, prompting praise from the birthday girl herself. "The omelette lady's food is yummy." These exchanges didn't sit well with my mother-in-law. Desperate to redirect attention, she insisted, "Look, Grandma's stew is also tasty." But her granddaughter rejected it, complaining, "It hurts my mouth." While my sister's husbands politely sampled her cooking, it quickly requested more water, noting the excessive saltiness. My sister-in-law jokingly suggested I give her cooking lessons, which only fueled my mother-in-law's anger. She stormed out of the room, refusing to return. I regretted agreeing to cook for the party, but my mother-in-law had requested it, leaving me no choice. The tense atmosphere led to an early end to the celebration. While my sister-in-law's comment was meant in jest, criticism of one's cooking stings. It likely hurt my mother-in-law, who had prepared the food with hopes of delighting everyone. That night, I apologized to her, acknowledging any overstepping. Her response was cold, "Don't get too comfortable. You're just a freeloader." The next morning marked the beginning of relentless bullying from my mother-in-law. She would season the breakfast I prepared without even tasting it. If it didn't meet her standards, she disposed of it in front of me. Seeking solace, I turned to my husband, Chris. His response was dismissive, suggesting I was overreacting and should have obeyed his mother. He also started coming home later, using work as an excuse, even skipping his niece's birthday party. This behavior shattered any illusions I had about the kind of man he was, despite us being married for only 6 months. Our marriage was crumbling, and the thought of divorce crossed my mind. However, with just 6 months of marriage under our belt, I hesitated, knowing it would upset our parents. Then things took a turn for the worse. My mother-in-law slipped on the stairs, injuring her leg. Despite offers from my sister-in-law to assist, my mother-in-law insisted on my help, stating, "You're technically the wife, so you should at least do this much. It's absurd to rely on my daughter." From then on, I was at my mother-in-law's beck and call, even for trivial tasks. She began contacting me during work hours, forcing me to request time off repeatedly. Although my co-workers assured me it was fine, I felt guilty and eventually resigned from my job. It seemed my mother-in-law had been waiting for this moment, mocking me, "Can't handle your prestigious job anymore, can you?" How pathetic! Suddenly, day and night, my mother-in-law summoned me incessantly, leaving me no time to rest. Whenever I attempted to discuss things with Chris, he was increasingly absent, claiming to sleep at his office, though I doubted his words. My decision was made, but I couldn't leave without making a move, so I resolved to seek revenge. During breakfast one morning, I broached the topic. I want a divorce. They both looked shocked, dismissing my request with scorn. "What nonsense! We've barely been married a year. You'll be the laughingstock. Accusing me of infidelity? Absurd. You're embarrassing us, Emily. You're way out of line." Despite their mockery, I stood firm. Chris is always absent. My mother-in-law only knows how to bully. Who'd want to endure that? I'm filing for divorce. My decision stands. My resolute stance alarmed them, prompting Chris to stutter an apology. "We're sorry. I'll try to come home earlier. You can even stay at your parents' for a while." "But my mom's injured and I have work. Can't you stay until she recovers?" Though he struggled to apologize, his sincerity was evident. "I've been immature. I'm sorry. Can't you reconsider?" I reluctantly agreed, yet their smirks betrayed their true feelings, typical of a mother and son. Following that, the bullying ceased, and Chris began returning home earlier. However, the tranquility was short-lived. Chris resumed his late returns, and my mother-in-law's mistreatment resumed. Despite her leg failing to heal, she frequently ventured out, citing hospital visits. This behavior struck me as odd, leading me to uncover a shocking truth. Days later, my phone buzzed incessantly with calls from Chris and my mother-in-law. Chris's tone was heated when I answered. "Where are you? How can you leave my mom like this? Unfazed, I responded, I'm at my parents' house. What's wrong? You said I could go. What are you saying? My mom's leg isn't better, right? In the background, I heard my mother-in-law causing a commotion. Regardless, I won't return. Please communicate through a lawyer, I declared before hanging up. Following that ordeal, I relished the peaceful moments at my parents' home. They pampered me with my favorite meals, and I reciprocated by cooking for them. When my mother praised my cooking as the best, tears welled up in my eyes. A few days later, I received an unexpected call from my dreaded mother-in-law. She apologized for her past behavior and extended an invitation to her upcoming birthday party, insisting I attend. The celebration would take place at a chic restaurant near the station, renowned for its new French-trained chef and authentic cuisine. Though not obligated, I saw it as an opportunity and accepted eagerly. My mother-in-law was thrilled, emphasizing the importance of my presence and promptly sharing the details. On the day of the birthday party the following week, Chris and my mother-in-law awaited me at the restaurant entrance. As I approached, Chris wore a smirk, and my heart sank. The gathering mirrored the previous one. 2 sets of sister-in-laws with their husbands and a little girl, alongside my mother-in-law, husband, and myself, totaling 8. The impending divorce remained a secret, with instructions to disclose it after the meal. Amidst the anticipation, the sister-in-laws and their spouses arrived. Emily, it's been too long. You look stunning as always, they greeted warmly. With everyone present, we proceeded into the restaurant. However, our party of 8 seemed to puzzle the waiter. Is the reservation for 7 people? We're 8, he questioned. Before I could respond, my mother-in-law interjected loudly, the reservation is indeed for 7. We prefer this person to be seated separately, please, pointing at me as she spoke. As I was pushed forward, confusion painted the faces of the sister-in-laws and their husbands, while Chris and my mother-in-law exchanged smirks. Ha, so this was their plan. How amusing. Emily has a surprise, doesn't she? My mother-in-law declared, revealing the supposed surprise at her own birthday party, much to my bewilderment. Well, if my mother-in-law enjoys surprises, then I'll gladly provide one. Emily, is it true? The sisters-in-law appeared concerned, prompting my response, yes, indeed. I had hoped to keep it under wraps, but my mother-in-law caught wind of it. Pardon me, is there an available seat? I inquired of the waiter, who kindly led me to a seat out of sight from my in-laws, a welcome relief. While they enjoyed their meal, including a specially prepared kids' meal for one of the sisters-in-law's daughters, I remained out of their view. The atmosphere seemed pleasant. The young girl exclaimed joyfully, "Wow! This tastes just like my sister's omelet." Her sisters echoed similar sentiments, praising the food's deliciousness. My mother-in-law beamed with pride, boasting, "You see? Since the chef changed, the flavors have vastly improved. Wait until you try the meat dishes after this," she boasted, with my husband nodding in agreement. Then came the moment my mother-in-law had eagerly awaited, the arrival of the meat dish she had boasted about. A tantalizing plate was placed in front of my sister-in-law and her husband. However, as minutes passed, no food arrived for my mother-in-law and husband. Growing impatient, they beckoned the waiter, demanding answers. What's the holdup? My mother-in-law's voice boomed, the loudness seeming out of place in the elegant restaurant, prompting grimaces from nearby patrons. The chef himself will serve your dishes. Please be patient, the waiter calmly responded, to which my mother-in-law retorted, "Oh, really? Is it because we're regulars?" Despite her tone, she didn't appear entirely displeased. "Apologies for the delay," they muttered, clearly expecting a waiter, but were met with shock when they saw who brought their dishes. Their eyes widened in disbelief as they gazed upon me, donning a chef's coat. "What? Emily, what's going on? Ah, so this is what a surprise feels like. Emily, you never fail to surprise us." Despite the sisters-in-law's amazement, my husband and mother-in-law wore expressions that clearly said, "This isn't what we had planned." Ignoring their reactions, I proceeded to serve the dishes without a care in the world. "I've prepared this dish especially tailored to your tastes. I announced as I placed a peculiar black lump smothered in rich soy sauce in front of my mother-in-law. With a flourish, I poured even more soy sauce onto it. She stood frozen, clearly taken aback. And for our special guest, I continued, presenting a plate adorned with an assortment of batteries, ranging from AA to D. To add an extra kick, please help yourself to some soy sauce, I added, setting a whole bottle in front of my husband. After all, he's always buzzing about work. I quipped, arranging the batteries for my electrician husband, even selecting the priciest ones available at other electronic stores. I anticipate some gratitude for my efforts. My nieces erupted into laughter at the sight. My sister-in-law and her husband wore expressions suggesting, "Isn't this a bit over the top?" Meanwhile, my mother-in-law and husband flushed red with embarrassment, bellowing, "You're making a mockery of us and this establishment. Get the manager." As my husband made the demand, the manager emerged, calmly stating, "That would be me." "What on earth were you thinking? We're the customers here. We'll take legal action," they threatened, to which the manager calmly responded, "Is that so? Well, in that case, we'll be pursuing legal action against you two for disrupting our business." Their response? A puzzled huh? It became apparent that my in-laws were frequent patrons of the restaurant, often exhibiting arrogance towards the staff. They had a reputation for nitpicking, never considering the inconvenience they caused other customers. Their troublesome behavior was well known. "We've tolerated it because you're family, but it seems it's time to put some distance between us. Right, Emily?" "Absolutely, big brother." Upon hearing this revelation, my in-laws turned their surprised gazes towards us. "You see, this restaurant has been managed by my brother for quite some time now. He resides in France and couldn't make it back for our wedding due to his busy schedule." Despite sending his congratulations, my mother-in-law and my husband, Bob, had never met him. However, my brother had seen family photos and recognized both of them, I explained. "I deeply regret not being able to attend your wedding. I attempted to reach out several times, but you always seemed to have company," I continued, watching as their faces paled. The conversation grew tense. My sisters-in-law urged their husbands to leave first, then proposed, "Shall we delve into this further?" Though they smiled, their eyes betrayed a seriousness that sent a chill down my spine. "It's merely business, you know. The old-timers on Main Street, they prefer these modern spots these days," Chris interjected. As he spoke, a waiter approached and handed him an earring, remarking, "You left this behind last time." "Dining with men who wear earrings, quite suspicious, isn't it?" my sister-in-law commented with a smirk. Unable to contain my laughter, I responded, "No, dear sister-in-law, this man has been having an affair with a woman who works at a florist near his shop." Chris's face drained of color as he glanced at me, silently questioning how I knew. Little did he know, I had hired a private investigator some time ago. My intuition had proven correct. Chris had been meeting the woman almost daily after work. This restaurant appeared to be their favorite haunt, as they visited nearly every week. The evidence, including photos of their rendezvous at a hotel, was abundant. "I'm serious about her. Marrying you was a mistake. I'm ready for a divorce," Chris declared, his stance on divorce suddenly shifting. "That works for me. I've been wanting a divorce too," I replied, seizing the opportunity. "But I'll be seeking alimony, so be prepared to pay up." "I just landed a major contract," I added. "I'll happily comply," he chuckled. "Good to hear. Now, as for you, mother-in-law." My mother-in-law, who had remained silent until then, visibly trembled. Though not as frequent a patron as Chris, she too had her own routine here. "But I'm already a widow," she protested. "That's irrelevant," I countered. Upon hearing her confession, I felt compelled to reveal another piece of information. "I had the private investigator look into you as well, mother-in-law. It seems your relationship with your partner has been ongoing for about 5 years. However, didn't father-in-law pass away just last year?" My sisters-in-law shot their mother a glare of anger. No surprises there. The two of them were always closer to our esteemed father than to our mother. Discovering the truth, They were understandably furious. I too was taken aback by the level of detail the investigator had uncovered about my mother-in-law. It was revealed that my father-in-law had also hired the same investigator. "You've been deceiving us about Dad all this time. And Chris, you're cheating on Emily. Have you both lost your minds?" The sisters-in-law's anger showed no signs of abating. Recognizing that our presence was disturbing other patrons, we agreed to disperse for the day and reconvene at the in-laws' house on another occasion. On that day, I bid farewell to my brother and the staff with spirited high fives. A few days later, in the presence of my two sisters-in-law, the divorce papers were filled out. My husband, showing no remorse, grumbled phrases like, "Well, just make sure you don't regret it, all right?" Despite my limited mobility, I ended up with such a troublesome wife. Exhausted by his endless complaints, I snapped, "Mind your step, mother-in-law." She jolted, responding with a puzzled, "What?" It was evident her leg had fully healed. Despite this, she continued to feign discomfort, solely to torment me. Her spiteful behavior confirmed her status as nothing more than a stranger to me. Thus, my brief marital journey came to an end in less than a year, and I had no regrets. Afterward, alimony payments for both my ex-husband and his mistress were deposited into my account simultaneously. While it seemed my ex-husband covered his mistress's portion too, that detail was inconsequential. Following the divorce, despite plunging into debt to fulfill his alimony obligations, my ex-husband was swiftly dumped by his newfound partner. Later, I discovered from my sister-in-law that the woman was notorious in her hometown as a homewrecker. Despite my ex-husband boasting about securing a major contract, it transpired that the restaurant was filled mostly with regular customers on the day we visited. As we exited the restaurant, following an encounter with the complaining couple, applause erupted in our wake. My brother confided in me, saying, "I heard from our other sibling that the reservation was only for 7 people, so I assumed there wasn't room for me anyway, which is why I went along with the plan." As expected, they are now prohibited from ever setting foot in the restaurant again. News of their misconduct quickly spread, resulting in the loss of their significant contract. It's a fitting consequence, I suppose. Their electronics store seemed to thrive on trust, but their future success is now uncertain. As for my mother-in-law, she too suffered repercussions. Not only was she abandoned by her partner, but her poor health led to a diagnosis revealing that her long-term dietary habits were to blame. Despite treatment, her body will never fully recover. It seems like a fitting consequence for her actions as well. As for me, I've returned to my job at the familiar Western-style restaurant. Despite the tumultuous events, my colleagues warmly embraced me back into the fold. "Welcome back, omelette lady," they greeted me with affection. My sisters-in-law remain loyal patrons of the restaurant. They severed ties with their mother and brother following the incident. They couldn't overlook the betrayal towards me, someone they had treated like a younger sister, and the deceit towards their late father. Their resolve to maintain this distance remains steadfast. Despite the challenges, my true joy lies in the kitchen. Cooking brings me unparalleled happiness, and in this moment, I find myself at my happiest.
Once, something happened that I never expected. I took my husband to the doctor for his usual checkup, but instead of everything being fine, the doctor said something really serious. Dr. Lawrence looked very serious and told me something shocking about my husband. I felt really scared and couldn't believe what I was hearing. My husband, who I always looked after when he was sick, was now someone I was afraid of. The doctor even said I might need to keep away from him for my own safety. This made me feel really anxious and frightened. Hi, I'm Betty Frieden, and I've spent the last decade working at a big pharmaceutical company. It's like a second home to me, a place where I feel comfortable and like I belong. Even though I'm 50, I still work full-time, and my coworkers really respect me for it. Not many people my age are still working, but I've always enjoyed it. I think part of the reason I'm so dedicated to my job is because I didn't get married until 4 years ago. My boss, Gerald, and I are close, maybe because we're both single. Once he jokingly asked if I was ever going to tie the knot, but I knew he was just teasing. Around that time, I was seeing Richard secretly, who later became my husband. Richard's a bit older, was married before, and like me, he didn't want kids. We met through a matchmaking service for people looking for companionship in their later years. We decided to keep our relationship a secret, not telling anyone about our plans, even though our boss joked about marriage. Eventually, Richard and I quietly got married without any big ceremony, just signing papers at City Hall. I was surprised by how simple it all was, but I was really looking forward to our life together. But then, with Dr. Lawrence's worrying advice, I had to rethink everything. My caring feelings for my sick husband were now mixed up with fear and doubt. Dr. Lawrence's words kept playing in my head, telling me I needed to do something to stay safe. Standing there, trying to understand what was happening, I realized I had to make a decision, and quickly. Suddenly, the life I knew and the future I imagined felt uncertain. I'm LA, and my husband Richard works at a factory. Honestly, I make more money than he does. Richard got his job right after high school. As for me, I grew up in an orphanage and always wanted to be independent. That's why I didn't want to quit my job at the pharmaceutical company after we got married. I loved my job too much. When Richard and I got married, I told my manager Gerald right away. He congratulated me, but I could tell he had mixed feelings. Maybe he felt a bit lonely because his single buddy got married first. I tried joking with him about it, but he didn't seem to want to talk about it, so I dropped it. Despite Gerald's reaction, I was really happy about starting this new chapter with Richard. I imagined all the great things our future would bring. But reality wasn't as bright as I'd hoped. Life as newlyweds was pretty ordinary. Not much changed for me. I kept working, and the biggest change was moving to a more rural area and driving instead of taking the bus. Richard and I shared my old car because he didn't have one. About a year into our marriage, things started to get tough. Richard started showing signs of being depressed. He seemed different, barely eating breakfast, lost in thought, and even mixing up simple things like condiments. His clothes didn't match, and he became quieter both at work and at home. While I always admired Richard's quiet strength, his silence became too much, making it feel like I was living alone. This loneliness crept up on me as I noticed these small but important changes in him. I realized that Richard might be struggling with a mental health issue. Watching someone you care about struggle without knowing how to help is really tough. So I took Richard to a clinic that focuses on both mind and body health, where he was diagnosed with depression. I had a basic understanding of depression, but hearing the diagnosis made everything feel a bit darker. The doctor explained that the best way to deal with depression is to address its main cause directly. Finding the exact cause of Richard's depression was tough. He had been working at the same factory for years without any problems, and nothing major had changed in his job. If anything, I worried that maybe our marriage had something to do with it. But when we talked to the doctor, I told him we were happy together and couldn't see any obvious problems at home that might have caused Richard's depression. The doctor told us to come back if we noticed any changes or had any ideas about what might be causing it. But even after several visits to the clinic, we couldn't figure out why Richard was feeling so down. As time went on, his depression just got worse. On his worst days, he could hardly get out of bed. Sometimes he'd have headaches, or he'd call in sick to work. His appetite disappeared, and he noticeably lost weight. Eventually, he couldn't keep working and had to quit his job. Richard felt really guilty about relying on me financially, but I told him I was okay with it. My main concern was his health. It was hard to see him struggling so much, and I worried about him constantly, especially when I was at work. There was a scary moment when he got lost while out, which made me worry he might not just be dealing with depression, but maybe dementia too. This idea added to my stress. When coworkers asked how things were going, I had to admit that Richard wasn't getting better. Watching someone you love suffer so much without knowing how to help is really tough. One day, Gerald noticed I looked exhausted and gave me an energy drink. Drinking it made me feel a bit better, and I was touched by his support. He reminded me that we're all in this together, and his words nearly made me cry. With everything going on with Richard, I hadn't realized how much stress I'd been carrying. I realized I had to hold myself together, or I might fall apart too. So I focused on my work, trying to keep some normalcy in our lives. A year passed, and things with Richard didn't get better. They actually got worse. As our third wedding anniversary neared, I couldn't see any hope for his condition. Then one morning, I noticed our car was missing. I checked again, but it was definitely gone. Since Richard's diagnosis, I was the only one who drove it, and I hadn't used it since the day before, so it should have been at home. Worried, I asked Richard if he knew anything about where the car might be. He casually mentioned he thought it was there when he got home yesterday. I remembered he had gone out for a bit while I was at work. The doctor had suggested he try walking or jogging to help him cope. If the car was there when he came back, it must have disappeared sometime during the night. With the car gone, I had no choice but to use public transport, which made me about 10 minutes late for work. I told Gerald about the missing car, and although he understood it, he was puzzled too. He wondered if Richard might have taken it, but I didn't think so, considering Richard's condition and how he avoided driving since he got sick. It just didn't add up. Despite Richard's memory lapses and mood swings, I couldn't imagine him being behind the missing car. The car mystery added another layer of complexity to our already difficult situation. As soon as I realized the car was gone, I reported it to the police, hoping it would be found soon. But deep down, I worried it might be gone for good. And if that wasn't enough, something else strange happened on the day I was supposed to get my paycheck. I went to the bank and found my personal account was empty. I was shocked. We did have a shared account, which I checked next, only to find it was empty too. I was completely puzzled. Richard and I shared a joint account, but he didn't have access to my personal account and he didn't know its PIN. Yet, somehow, all our savings were gone. I felt a cold shock wash over me, and when I got home, I confronted Richard. I asked him if he knew anything about the missing money from our joint account. He seemed genuinely confused and denied knowing anything about it. Because of his depression, I hesitated to push him further, worried it might make things worse for him. Richard looked distant, lost in one of his frequent dazes caused by his condition. I couldn't help but wonder if he could have taken the money without realizing it. Planning to discuss this with the police, I felt overwhelmed by the double blow of losing both our car and our savings. The financial strain was tough, especially since I didn't have family to fall back on. With the small community clinic unable to provide enough help for Richard, we decided to switch him to a larger hospital with more resources. They gave us a referral letter, so we took a taxi to our first appointment at the general hospital. The whole experience was new and a bit scary for me, and I felt uneasy throughout the journey. Richard stayed quiet, lost in his thoughts as we arrived at the hospital. Taking a deep breath, I walked in and handed over the referral letter at the reception, expecting a wait. The general hospital was bustling with patients, each waiting for their turn. After about an hour, Richard was called in for his consultation. While he went inside, I took out a book to pass the time. But hardly had Richard entered the doctor's office when a nurse approached me. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Simmons?" she asked. I confirmed, and she said the doctor wanted to see me. Familiar with discussing Richard's condition, I assumed it was a routine matter and followed her, though with some anxiety. The nurse led me to a different room, where a doctor, about 10 years older than me with graying hair and a gentle manner, greeted me. Before I could even sit down, I asked if this was about Richard's condition. He nodded seriously, and I braced myself for potential bad news. The doctor's next words caught me completely off guard. He advised me to keep my distance from my husband, revealing that Richard had been arrested for fraud a decade ago. My mind was racing with confusion. Why was this coming up now, during a routine medical visit? The doctor explained his suspicions about Richard's depression, suggesting that he might be faking it. He recalled recognizing Richard from a surgery 10 years back, where he had treated a deep cut on Richard's leg. It was a shock. I had thought we were addressing Richard's mental health, only to uncover his hidden past and a potential deception about his current condition. This unexpected revelation left me stunned, trying to reconcile the caring husband I knew with the person the doctor described. When the doctor mentioned recognizing a large scar on Richard's right leg, everything clicked into place. I knew about the scar but never knew how he got it, as Richard had never mentioned it. Finding out that the doctor before me was the one who had treated Richard's injury years ago felt like an unbelievable twist of fate. The doctor's revelation continued, unveiling that Richard had injured himself during a confrontation with his former wife, stemming from his fraudulent actions against her. He had stolen her luxury possessions and money. Shockingly, he had even pretended to have dementia during that period, tricking his wife into lowering her guard before committing the fraud. This repeated behavior of feigning illness to aid his deception was horrifying. Learning about Richard's criminal history and his arrest was overwhelming. I hadn't investigated Richard's past before marrying him. Having been alone for most of my life, I was just grateful to find someone willing to be my partner. The doctor's grave warning that Richard could pose a threat to me sent shivers down my spine. There was a gravity in his tone that made it clear this was a serious issue. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been deceived. In the days that followed, I struggled to maintain a facade of normalcy around Richard while secretly plotting my next moves. I made the decision to install surveillance cameras throughout our home to monitor Richard's actions when I wasn't present. About a week later, I noticed that a watch and bag were missing. Upon reviewing the footage from the cameras, I saw Richard leaving the house with them and returning later with a stack of cash, looking oddly pleased with himself. His behavior didn't match that of someone suffering from depression. This footage confirmed my worst suspicions. Richard was responsible for stealing my belongings, the car, and our savings. Confronted with undeniable evidence of his deceit, I felt crushed. Richard had lied to me and manipulated me, betraying the trust I had placed in him. It became clear that I needed to take significant action against someone who had pretended to be vulnerable and in need of care, only to exploit my compassion and generosity. The realization that Richard had betrayed my trust was agonizing. I had devoted myself to working and caring for what I believed was an ailing partner. Divorce seemed like too feeble a response to the profound deceit I had endured. It was evident that we needed to go our separate ways. But I desired more than just a mere separation. I wanted Richard to fully grasp the seriousness of his actions and to rectify the harm he had caused. With a heavy heart and tears threatening to spill, I gathered the divorce papers and meticulously completed them with all the necessary details. The next day, feigning normalcy, I informed Richard that I needed to step out briefly. I had already arranged to take a day off from work, explaining the urgency of my situation to my understanding employer, who had granted me the sudden leave. At the police station, I presented my case, displaying the footage I had captured of Richard's deception to the officers. Initially, they seemed hesitant to take action based solely on the video evidence. However, after confirming with the pawn shop where Richard had sold the stolen items and tracking down my car being sold as a used vehicle, the evidence against him began to accumulate. It was also discovered that he had illegally accessed my bank accounts, raising suspicions about his purported depression. As the truth came to light, I was flooded with a complex mix of relief and sorrow. The police decided to move swiftly given Richard's criminal history, and they prepared to arrest him. Upon returning home with the officers in the early afternoon, I found Richard there, visibly taken aback by my unexpected return and the presence of the police. Despite the divorce papers clutched in my hand, his focus remained on the officers as one of them announced his arrest for fraud. Richard attempted to protest, citing his depression as a defense, but I knew better. The doctor from the general hospital had already cast doubt on the legitimacy of his claims regarding his mental health condition. In that pivotal moment, as the weight of both the legal repercussions and the dissolution of our marriage settled on him, Richard's facade began to crumble. Choosing this course of action was agonizing but essential to safeguard myself and pursue justice for the betrayal and manipulation I had endured. At the police station, my sudden eruption of emotion caught even the officers off guard, but it seemed to finally pierce through Richard's veneer of composure. As the police placed him in handcuffs, Richard's facade of defiance cracked. He appeared defeated, his bravado replaced by frustration as he was escorted away. Observing the scene unfold, I felt strangely detached, as though I were watching the unraveling of someone else's life. Since the doctor's sobering warning, reality had felt distorted. Yet here I stood, confronting the stark truth of my circumstances, determined to forge ahead from the chaos Richard had wrought. Witnessing Richard being escorted away by the police felt surreal, akin to a scene from a dream. This moment marked a significant turning point, offering a glimpse of a return to the life I had known before the tumult of marriage consumed it. While a sense of relief washed over me, knowing I would no longer be ensnared in Richard's manipulative grasp, it was followed by a wave of loneliness. After waiting over 47 years to marry, the prospect of solitude once again loomed over my newfound liberation. 2 months later, our divorce was officially finalized. The process had been slightly delayed due to Richard's arrest, but as everything became official, my emotions had settled, allowing me to reflect on our shared history with clarity. Richard's future was uncertain, facing imprisonment for his second offense. I could only hope that this experience would prompt him to genuinely reconsider his choices. In the aftermath of our marriage, which had disintegrated into nothing more than a disillusioning memory, I found myself contemplating my next steps during a simple lunch at work. It was then that my boss, Gerald, approached, casually making a remark as he joined me with his store-bought hot dog lunch. "I think you'd be just fine if you were with me," he said, almost casually. His words caught me off guard, and it took a moment for their full weight to sink in, leaving me momentarily flustered. "Yes, I'm serious," he added, noticing my hesitation, his tone smooth yet sincere. I was left speechless, my lunch momentarily forgotten, as I processed his proposition. Gerald then returned to work, leaving me to mull over his unexpected offer. In the days that followed, the thought of a romantic relationship with Gerald hadn't crossed my mind, yet I couldn't ignore the care and stability he had consistently shown me. His dependable presence and responsible demeanor suddenly seemed to shine in a new light. Despite my initial surprise as I continued eating, the possibilities Gerald had introduced began to take root, hinting at a future I hadn't dared to consider until now. The idea of inviting Gerald out for a meal after work ignited a warmth within me, sparking a glimmer of hope for what lay ahead. Perhaps this was the perfect moment to embark on a fresh journey, exploring the potential for happiness and companionship once again. Stepping out of my comfort zone and into a new beginning with someone who had always been kind and supportive felt both exhilarating and reassuring. Tonight, I resolved, could mark the beginning of something wonderful and new.